Everything they thought they knew about their gift was wrong. In the kingdom of Verheiden, art is more than expression, it is power. The muse-touched, blessed with supernatural inspiration, create works of breathtaking beauty, their gifts whispered to be the echoes of divine muses. But beneath the harmony of their craft lies a secret hidden for centuries. Their power is not their own. When Master Bard Dorian Silversong is summoned by the headmaster of the illustrious Collegium Bardica, he expects to give trusted counsel to his friend and teacher. Instead, he finds himself ensnared in a deadly intrigue. Muse-touched artisans are vanishing, and a shadowy force seeks to overpower the sacred bond between creators and their muses. At the heart of it all stands a renowned orator and calculating politician whose honeyed words mask a terrifying agenda, one that could rip apart the veil between worlds and enslave the kingdom to an unseen darkness. With time running out, Dorian must navigate a court of masked intentions, unravel mysteries centuries in the making, and confront the true nature of his own gift. But the muse touch is fickle, and creation always demands a price. In a world where art is the lifeblood of civilization, what will remain when inspiration is devoured by shadow? A lyrical fantasy of intrigue, ambition, and the transformative power of creativity, Muses War, Overture of Shadow is a symphony of magic, intrigue, and unforgettable characters. My name is Wally Waltner. I am a proud member of the Raconteur Press stable. By way of introduction, I'm a farm kid from South Dakota and have spent all of my life doing creative things. I fell into writing at FenCon 2022, met a lot of y'all, and as a result, I have now decided that becoming a gentleman science fiction and fantasy author is going to be my retirement career. I have done a half dozen short stories and a couple of postcards through Raconteur Press. And in April of last year, y'all were kind enough to invite me to be part of the initial group for your novel launches. I pitched an idea that I've had in my mind for a long time, just because, again, I'm a creative person, and bards and creativity have always been part of my identity, both in the SCA, it's my favorite class when I play D&D, all of that kind of stuff. So a story about the power of creativity and the role of art in society, it was always going to be part of any fantasy series I wrote. So with that, I'm going to read 3 excerpts in total. I'm going to start with the opening chapter, which is entitled The Highwayman and the Hearth. Any last words, fool? With a knife at his throat, Dorian Silversong considered the question. The voice was menacing, yet strong and steady as it spoke in Dorian's ear. The tone suggested the speaker's comfort with the notion of killing him to get what he wanted. The cold steel of the blade against his skin sent a chill down his spine, and it took effort not to swallow. He sensed no muse touch on the weapon, but the sharp edge would kill him just the same. With practiced calm, he called upon his muse, letting its power flow through his voice to quell the agitation bristling within him as he answered. Several, actually. Would you like to hear them? The bandit blinked, taken aback at the sheer cheek of the response. Who in the 13 bloody hells did this jester think he was? Who was this fool to mock him, to question his willingness to spill blood without hesitation or remorse? He'd killed before. He had no qualms doing it so again. His hand gripped the knife tighter, and he scraped the edge lightly against the fool's neck. And yet, for some inexplicable reason, he wanted to listen to what the man had to say. Something in his voice was comforting, enticing. The familiar thrill of exacting violence drifted away at the invitation. Go on then, the bandit growled. Amuse me, you'll live another minute or two. Dorian closed his eyes and allowed the vision his muse gave him to flow through his mind. He channeled the scene, and the power his muse infused it with let his mouth speak. Once there was a highwayman who rode the remote trade routes along the lonely forest in western Hinterhold. Roguishly handsome, skilled with both sword and pistol, he struck fear in the hearts of the merchants he raided, frustration in the men sent to capture him, and swooning from the young noble girls who imagined they might tame him given the chance. The common folk considered the highwayman a hero. His favorite targets were the tax collectors who kept the lower classes poor and dependent, and he returned most of what was taken from them. The highwayman did this not out of principle, but out of practicality. Keeping the peasantry on his side meant that they'd misdirect the authorities or provide a hiding place if needed. Besides, stealing from those who had nothing was neither profitable or challenging. On a fair summer morning, the highwayman came across a maiden on horseback, riding alone through the borderlands. This surprised the highwayman, for it was well known that to ride without an escort through the lonely forest was both foolish and dangerous. But the highwayman knew an opportunity when he saw one, and took an expedient route through the wood to one of his preferred spots to lay in wait, with the intention of relieving her of any baubles she might have. When the highwayman revealed himself at the stream where he predicted the maiden would stop to drink, he got his first glimpse of her. She was the most beautiful creature the highwayman had ever seen. Tall and lithe, with a radiant face, long flowing flaxen hair, and eyes as serene as the crystal water she drew from the stream. The world around the highwayman faded away, and the maiden became the only thing that mattered. The maiden came up to the highwayman with graceful, delicate steps. So taken by her beauty he was that he could not move. His will slipped away from him with every approaching step of the angel. His sword arm slowly dropped to his side, his fingers slacking. The knife at Dorian's throat fell away, until the weapon dropped to the ground beside him. The maiden caressed the cheek of the highwayman and spoke softly. "There is weariness in your eyes, highwayman. You are tired, so tired. Give in to the call of slumber, dream of me, and we shall ride these roads together, free and happy." The bandit slumped to his knees, laid down on his side, and curled up on the ground, eyes closed and a smile on his face. Dorian began to vocalize a lullaby remembered from his own childhood. No words, a simple, lilting tune, sung with the purity of his voice, enhanced by his muse's power to ensure the bandit would not rouse. As Dorian sang, he retrieved a rope from his assailant's pack and bound his hands and feet. Dorian set the bandit's knife down by a tree a few yards away, where he would be able to find it and free himself, eventually. Collecting the coin the bandit had taken from him, along with his other belongings, Dorian went on his way, continuing his soothing song until the distance between them put Dorian well out of earshot. Damned fool indeed. Dorian's thoughts chided him for failing to maintain awareness of his surroundings. He had been so caught up in his thoughts that he lulled himself into a trance, reinforced by the steady rhythm of his walking. He'd been oblivious to the ambuscade he fell into, and could not even draw his side sword in defense. An amateur mistake, and one he cared not to repeat, despite the purpose of the journey weighing on his mind. So I've introduced my protagonist, Dorian.
Very nice.
I'm going to introduce a key supporting character and love interest, whose name is Lydia. So the scene changes to the city and the Collegium Bardica that Dorian is actually traveling to. This chapter, and I'll read the whole chapter, is called Of Entitlement and Exaction. The golden afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the Collegium Bardica, bathing the polished marble floors and carved wood paneling in a kaleidoscope of color. Lydia Gleamingharp sat regally between an ornate desk of dark mahogany in her study, reviewing a collection of students' poetry, jotting down notes on a separate parchment. Her eyes sparkled with delight as she read through the poems, her expression reflecting the vibrant colors of the stained glass windows around her. It was as if each verse was a delicate flower, blooming under her careful gaze, and bringing her joy with their words. She immersed herself in the rhythm and cadence, savoring the emotions and imagery they evoked. She took care to note how the students could improve and refine their craft, but even through the imperfections, the emotional core of the assignments showed through. A knock at the heavy oaken door drew her gaze upwards. "Enter," she called, her voice rich and melodious. The door creaked open. A young page, dressed in blue and silver livery, slipped inside. "My lady, the Lady Seraphina Ravenscroft is here to see you," he announced with a bow. Lydian's face remained professionally neutral, but she cringed inwardly. This was not her first encounter with Lady Ravenscroft, a rich, powerful aristocrat of Silean background, and younger sister of the current Baron of Silea, whose interests she represented in court. She was also the mother of a promising young student in the Collegium, Rosalind, and Lady Ravenscroft frequently grumbled about perceived inadequacies in both her training or recognition. "Show her in," Lydian replied. The page ducked back through the door with a nod. Moments later, the imposing figure of Lady Seraphina swept into the hall, the whispering silk of her gown trailing behind her. Her piercing blue eyes were hard and determined beneath her elegantly coiffed silver hair. The page announced her, then took his leave, closing the door softly behind him. "Lady Ravenscroft, welcome back to the Collegium," Lydian greeted cordially as she rose from her high-back chair. She extended the hand in welcome. Seraphina's lips pressed together in a thin line even as she accepted Lydian's handshake. "Mistress Gleaming Up," she glowered, foregoing the usual pleasantries. Lydian arched an eyebrow, but did not comment on the breach in courtesy. She resumed her seat and gestured to the chair outside, across her desk. "Please, have a seat." Lydian maintained eye contact with Lady Ravenscroft as she sank back into her own chair. Reaching for a kettle on the desk, Lydian offered, "Tea, my lady." Lady Ravenscroft shook her head silently. Lydian topped off her own cup and returned the kettle to the woven mat protecting the rich wood of the desk. Seraphina gathered her skirts and sat back straight and rigid, gloved hands folded neatly in her lap. Lydian studied the woman's flawless facade, knowing the tempest that likely brewed beneath the surface. There would be no graceful way to disappoint her. Best to be direct. "I presume the purpose for your visit concerns your daughter Rosalind's petition for apprenticeship." "It does?" Seraphina interjected coolly. "I have been more than generous in my patronage of the Collegium. Rosalind has studied here for years, showed exceptional talent. I expect her to be awarded an apprenticeship, as is her right." Lydian folded her hands atop the desk, choosing her next words carefully. "I understand your disappointment, my lady." Seraphina's eyes flashed. "Do you? Rosalind has been groomed for this her entire life. Her musicianship surpasses half your current apprentices." Lydian nodded, having expected this. "Her talent is not in question, my lady. In truth, Rosalind shows great promise," she conceded. "Her talents have blossomed under the tutelage of our finest instructors. However," "Yes?" Seraphina's eyes bore holes in Lydian. She met the overbearing mother's gaze with trained calm. She briefly considered channeling her muse to compel a de-escalation, but dismissed the idea almost as quickly as the thought came to her. It would only be a temporary solution, and there was a risk that someone as strong-willed as Lady Ravenscroft may realize what was being done. "Apprenticeship is not a right. It is reserved for those who are deemed ready to hold the Master of Arts title in their own right. By royal decree, the Collegium may only bestow the title on muse-touched individuals. While Rosalind has progressed admirably in her studies, we have seen no evidence yet," Lydian did allow a bit of muse-touch to flow through that emphasized word of possibility, "that she has been touched by the muse. Without that, we cannot, in good faith, sponsor her as an apprentice." Seraphina's painted lips thinned again. "It is not a matter of if, but when the muse visits her. I am sure of it. Rosalind's skills are superlative. Her poetry has won accolades from the masters themselves. You cannot continue to deny her this opportunity. We are not denying Rosalind anything. The answer is not no. It is not yet, Lydian maintained. Our standards exist for a reason. The apprenticeship is more than just advanced personal instruction in musical letters. Those who walk that path must exhibit the creativity bestowed upon them by the muse. Lydian's mind, with the support of her muse, considered her next words as she took in a fresh breath. It was not worth engaging Lady Ravenscroft on the foolishness of assuming the muse would visit Rosalind. It was not a guarantee, and even the great scholars still could not accurately predict such things. Better to remain positive, engaging in the possible, rather than invite more ground for disagreement. Rosalind is still young. The muse could visit her at any moment. And regardless, Rosalind is still a talented performer who is growing stronger and more confident every day. Seraphina's piercing eyes softened slightly, and she smiled, but the smile did not quite reach her eyes. Come now, Gleaming Harp. I know you've not taken a formal apprentice in nearly 5 years. Rosalind would benefit greatly from your wisdom. Your standing on the Royal Bardic Council and your personal standing in court would be enhanced with the support of my household. Lady Ravenscroft arched an elegant eyebrow. We are women of refined taste. I am confident we can come to an arrangement that is mutually beneficial. Her voice dripped with honeyed tones as she continued. Gods, it's a good thing she doesn't have the muse, Lydian thought to herself before replying. As it happens, it's been 5 years since I first sat as a counselor, and while I still tutor students, including Rosalind, as much as my duties permit, the responsibility of taking an apprentice is too great to make such a commitment without the capacity to invest what is needed to support the apprentice properly. Lydian took a sip of tea and cradled the cup in her hands. As for my standing in council or in court, I prefer to let my service speak for itself, plainly and without the perception of undue influence. Undue influence, Lady Ravenscroft scoffed, exasperation showing in her face. How is it that someone so well educated as you is so naive to how things work? Her smile faded, her eyes growing cold once more. Standards are well and good, but surely arrangements can be made for those of superior breeding and status. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. If not for yourself, Mistress Lydian, what of this institution you love? I would be happy to expand my current patronage, make a sizable contribution to the Collegium, enough to fund several scholarships, if Rosalind were to become your apprentice now. So, venal inducements are how things work? I do hope that is not what you are suggesting, Lady Seraphina. What do you think patronage is, Counselor? There's patronage, and there's bribery. One is principled, one is not. Lady Ravenscroft drew back, her smile vanishing. Principals do not pay for ink or parchment, nor do they warm these old halls against the winter chill. Her voice turned icy. Without patrons such as myself, this venerable institution would fade into irrelevance and decay. She rose swiftly, anger smoldering in her eyes. It is clear continuing this conversation is pointless if you will not see reason. You will regret denying my daughter her rightful place, Gleaming Harp. Mark my words. And with that, she turned on her heel and swept from the study, silk skirts whispering ominously in her wake. Lydian let out a slow breath as the door slammed shut. She had expected manipulations, but outright bribery and threats from one such as Lady Ravenscroft were alarming. Leaning back in her chair, Lydian closed her eyes and tried to center herself. The carved wood pressed into her shoulders, the plush velvet familiar against her skin. She focused on the sensations, the warmth of the flickering fire, the lingering sense of parchment and ink, interwoven with fragrant tea that permeated her study. Lady Ravenscroft's demands echoed in her mind. Privileged treatment and exceptions for her daughter, no matter what Rosalind's actual merit deserved. The promise of filthy lucre, power and standing in exchange for her integrity, thinly veiled threats against the Collegium's reputation and her own, should Lydian refuse. It was galling. Rosalind was indeed talented. She would not have said as much to Lady Ravenscroft if it were not so. The Muse was yet to visit the girl, though, and despite Seraphina's confidence, the Muse was fickle of who it chose. The Collegium standards existed for a reason, preserving the purity of the art. Making exceptions for the aristocracy would only dilute what made their calling sublime. She would need to speak with the headmaster and advise him of the patroness's attempt at coercion. I am jumping a little bit forward, so after a couple of chapters, Dorian arrives at the city, at the capital city, and he's approaching the guard gate after having acquired a ride and some additional exposition. As Dorian approached the gate on foot, the guards at the gate looked him over, assessing his modest traveling attire, weathered pack, and loot case. They wore expressions that spoke of boredom and suspicion in equal measure, the usual demeanor of those who spent their days scrutinizing a stranger. Clad in chainmail and helms, with tabards bearing the royal sigil, a lion rampant o'er, on a field of sable, beneath an eclipsed sun o'er, they raised their halberds in challenge. The sergeant, a seasoned veteran with a weather-beaten face and steel-gray eyes, called out in a clear, business-like tone, "State your business in the capital, sirrah." Dorian met the guard's challenge with a neutral stare, irritated at the challenge. With slow, nonchalant movement, Dorian reached inside his shirt and produced his medallion, marking him as a Collegium Bardica Master of Arts. This produced a raised eyebrow from the veteran, but nothing more. "I see. Begging your pardon, Master Bard." He signaled his cohort to stand down. Dorian nodded in acknowledgement and walked past them. "What's this then? A Master Bard with nothing to say?" One of the junior guards taunted to Dorian's back. "Oh, he's probably thinking about who he's going to trick into bed tonight with his fancy words." Another jeered, and snickering followed. Dorian stopped, closed his eyes, and ground his teeth. The first comment, he'd have let pass. The second, he turned to face the cohort reaching for his muse, then sang a single note at the guards who taunted him. The pitch was so high as to be inaudible, but its effects became apparent to the guards that mocked Dorian after a moment. They winced in pain, reflexively tossing their helms to the ground and covering their ears from the ringing Dorian's note was causing in them. The sergeant waited for a few seconds, then interjected. "If you please, Master Bard, that's enough." Dorian snapped his head to glare at the sergeant as he ceased his sonic assault. Hearing the gasps of relief from his men, the sergeant bowed slightly. "Thank you, Master Bard. I assure you, these men will be taught better manners." Dorian's face softened. It was a relief that he would not have to channel his muse on the senior man. With controlled breathing, Dorian managed the pain he had inflicted upon himself. His headache would pass in a few moments. The guards would feel the effects for hours. "I appreciate that, Sergeant. Good day." He turned and walked away quickly. Turning a corner, out of sight of the guards and passerby, Dorian leaned against the wall of the stone building to steady himself. Reaching for his water skin, he took a long drink, the coolness of the water bringing relief to his throat. He poured a small amount in his hand and wiped his face, using the hand to block the late afternoon sun. He'd only been inside for a few minutes, and it felt like the very walls were closing in on him. Gathering himself, he looked to the east to get his bearings, and his heart soared as the campus of the Grand University's Collegium Bardica came into view. With its soaring spires and vine-covered walls, the academy looked like something transplanted from the idyllic rural town where Dorian grew up. He smiled, remembering the hours spent cloistered in the library, poring over ancient texts, or practicing his lute on the quad under the dappled afternoon sunlight. The place felt like home. It troubled Dorian that the same city that housed the Collegium could feel so foreign. He loved the institution deeply, but the teeming urban center around it was a constant source of unease. As a student, he'd rarely ventured beyond the academy walls into the crowded, indifferent streets. And now, returning under such troubling circumstances, the disconnect between the place he loved and the setting he did not was jarring. Master Silversong, I presume? Startled, Dorian turned toward who named him. A lanky young man with flowing blonde hair, wearing the traditional white tunic and green belt of a Collegium Bardica student. Yes, I'm Dorian, but I'm not a law student. Have we met? No, but Mistress Lydian described you quite accurately, and tasked me with finding you when you arrived in the city, but before you got to the university. Reverend Athelstan, at your service, Master Dorian. I'm to bring you to Mistress Lydian with all due haste. Lord Dorian felt his blood rush upon hearing the name. Lydian. So many memories and emotions coursed through him, but he forced his face and body language to remain neutral. A pleasure, Revan, but I must go to Collegium immediately. I've urgent business with the headmaster. Revan looked around nervously, then leaned in close to whisper in Dorian's ear. The headmaster is dead, Master Dorian. And that brings me to about time. So May 25 is when we're planning to have it dropped. So,
May 25th.
So,
Yeah.
any thoughts or questions?
I want her clothes.
She wants to dress her character.
I was going to say, I'll take any advice from you, John, when it comes to
Oh, no, it's beautiful.
Okay.
Absolutely beautiful. Great job.
Wise.
She seems strangely familiar.
Lydian or Seraphina?
Serafino.
Yes, everyone's met a Seraphina. Good job, Wally.
Woo!